Well, hey, everybody, good evening. It is great to see all of you guys here. Welcome to our June Equipped event. Are we excited? Yes, we are. I love it. I love the energy in the room. Well, if you are new to the rescue mission or you're new to Equipped, Equipped is basically a speaker series that we do. It is the second Monday of every month, and the rescue mission brings in world-class speakers. And I really mean that. These are speakers who are really well-known, who write all kinds of books. They speak all over the world, but they love and support the rescue mission, and so they come here, they volunteer their time out of their love and their support. So we appreciate that so much, and it is such a blessing to have the speakers who come here every month. Tonight is no exception. We have an incredible speaker. I can't wait to introduce you to him, but I want to tell you a couple of things first. For those of you who are not new to Equipped, I look a little different than the person who's normally here. Brian Crane is the president of the rescue mission. He is normally the one who is up here hosting, but he is in Kentucky somewhere right now, along with several members of the executive team who are there for a rescue mission conference. So what happens when you need someone to fill in for you and you don't have a lot of time, you kind of dig around the house and see what you can find. And so he did that, and he found me. I'm Brian's wife, if I haven't met you. My name is Natasha. And so I am, thank you, woo, yes, okay, yay, all right. So I'm going to be hosting tonight and facilitating some questions at the end, and we will have questions at the end. So as you're listening to our speaker tonight, if things start to bubble up and you'd like to know more about that, write it down. Have some good questions at the end. That's some of my favorite time with the speakers that come here because you guys have great questions, so we will be doing that at the end tonight. The second thing that I want to say is I'm going to call up Mr. John Parrott, who facilitates the Apologetic Certificate program here at the Rescue Mission. He's going to tell you a little bit about that and some changes that are ahead. So, John, could you come on up?
Thank you, Natasha. I'm not known all over the world. I'm not famous. But we do have, thank you. We do have Bible in the Year. And that class, the changes that are going on is that class will be meeting now from 6:30 to 7:30 in the foyer. And there's only room for about 30 students, I'm told. So just heads up on that one. And that'll be this coming Thursday. Will be the first class in the foyer. It's where I started out many years ago, but it's where I'm going back to. And the other thing is, we, as many of you know, you've seen me talk about the Colorado Christian Apologetics Program, and it's the Lee Strobel Center at Colorado Christian. Well, that is on hiatus or being not. It's not going on right now. So you can't even get online to get on the course. We've got a lot of students. We have 92, I think, who are in that course, but it's simply taking a break. So there's nothing we can do about it. It's all good. We'll get back to it whenever they put it on back online. But in the meantime, Brian said, well, you should teach a course on Lee Strobel's new best-selling book, The Case for Heaven. And that course is going to happen now every Tuesday night at 6:30 to 7:30 in the foyer as well. So 2 classes will be in the foyer. Tuesday for the Lee Strobel book on Case for Heaven, and also then Thursday night for Bible in a Year. And we're going to start the study, about an 8 to 10 week study of the Apostle Paul in his journeys. And there's a lot of interesting stuff. So I hope that many of you come out. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I want to tell you a couple of quick dates coming up. So the next Equip sessions are on July 8th, and that's going to be Monique Dusson. She is here from the Center for Biblical Unity. She's amazing. So the Center for Biblical Unity focuses on issues of social justice. So how does the Bible's view of justice compare to the world's view of justice? And there are a lot of differences. And so she's going to be talking about that. And then, speaking of Lee Strobel, he's actually going to come speak here on July 19th. That is exciting. He is a famous author. There's a movie based on his life, the Case for Christ movie, and they're going to actually be showing that in the chapel that week so that you can watch the movie, and then he's actually going to come here and speak. That's going to be on a Friday night, so you're getting 2 equips in 1 month in July. Exciting. And that Friday night will replace the Celebrate Recovery meeting. So that's what we have to look forward to next month. But first, we have our incredible speaker for tonight, Dr. Craig Hazen. He is a friend, and he is a very funny guy. But as I told him, I don't want to build that up too much because then you're going to expect him to be like a comedian, and then you only go down from there. So I'll just say he's a funny guy. Here is the official bio. Craig Hazen is a professor of comparative religion and Christian apologetics at Biola University, and he's the founder and the director of the Christian apologetics program there. He has authored or contributed to a range of scholarly works, including To Everyone an Answer, the Apologetic Study Bible, the breakout novel 5 Sacred Crossings, and his latest book, Fearless Prayer. Dr. Hazen holds a PhD in religious studies, a degree in biological sciences, and has studied international law and human rights in France. He has lectured all over North America, Europe, and East Asia on the evidence for the resurrection, religion and science, and Christianity among world religions. He is a former co-host of a national radio talk program and a regular on-camera expert for broadcast television. I told you, world-class speakers here. Dr. Hazen and his wife Karen live in Southern California and have 4 adult children. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Craig Hazen.
Thanks, Natasha. Yeah, now I got to live up to all that stuff. Good luck. Well, this is fun. Look at you all out there. I just love this little auditorium, you know. This is the kind of thing, the big auditoriums, you know, like those mega churches and stuff, they're kind of hard to speak in, but this is nice. In fact, there's a few too many of you. Would you mind a few of you just leaving? Because it'll be a nice intimate group then. Oh, okay, you could stay. Well, again, my name's Craig. That's Natasha. By the way, Natasha, you know, she's busy, talking about what I've written and done. This woman's written an entire shelf full of books, you know, and they're all wonderful. So just go to Natasha Crane at your local bookstore, back up a truck, and get all her titles, you know. So she's wonderful. And you've probably met Brian, her husband. He's okay. Well, what you're going to get tonight is a lecture in the field of apologetics. How good. You're still here. I want to make sure you knew what you're getting into. Apologetics is actually a grand old discipline. I mean, it goes right back into the Bible itself. The word apologion, from what we get, apologetics, it actually comes straight from the Bible, so we're not doing anything that's weird or prohibited. In fact, we find it in 1 Peter 3:15. Peter writes this, and it's an apostolic command, for goodness sake, so we have to pay attention to this. He says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and with respect. You know, that's the great apologist mandate. We go out and we make our case. Right? We give good reasons as to why a person should put their faith or their trust in the Lord Jesus Christ. So this is not something that's out of bounds or anything like that. In fact, it's a pretty important task. There's a lot of people who don't go that direction at all. In fact, they think we're a little bit strange, and they think that really we're not about answering questions and offering reasons for faith. Rather, we're about blind leaping. That's what Christianity is really, at the core, is about blind leaping. And there's a fellow who teaches at the University of Southern California. He's in the engineering department. His name is Bart Costco. No, he didn't invent the mega department store. He's an engineering professor at USC. And he is a devout atheist, and he thinks Christians are a bit loopy. And he got really mad one time when the city of Los Angeles gave money to faith-based organizations to do good in the community. Now, why was Bart Costco so upset about this? Because they were giving money to faith-based organizations, you know. And he's an atheist, and he thinks that's a ridiculous thing to do. So he writes an op-ed piece to the LA Times. That is, an opinion piece, a letter to the editor, and they publish it. And I read it, I cut it out, and I carry it with me to this day. Here's what Bart Costco says in the opening of his letter. He describes faith. So see if this actually lines up with what you have in terms of faith. He says, faith is unwarranted belief. Faith is belief without evidence or despite evidence to the contrary. Faith occurs when a person believes that something is true even though he suspects it's false. It takes large doses of such faith to support the very existence of casinos, psychic hotlines, astrology columns, mall Santas, and most organized religions. I didn't sign up for that. Is that what you signed up for? Oh my gosh. He's basically saying faith is blind leaping. What religious people do in Bart Costco's mind is they walk out to the edge of the religious abyss, right? There's the abyss out there. And they stand on the precarious edge, and at the given time, they close their eyes and they leap. It doesn't matter what's out there because it doesn't matter. It's religion. That's where he goes with this. Is that a reasonable way to approach it? Well, I guess you can go that way if you want to. But one reason I am a Christian, and I became a Christian as a senior in high school, and I've remained a Christian to this day. Then the reason I became a Christian and the reason I remain a Christian to this day is because it turns out Christianity's true. Does that shock you? Turns out Christianity is true. And here's something very important. It's demonstrably true. That is, it's not just true because I believe it. I walk around happy as a clam because, I know Jesus. I have some truth inside me that says Jesus is real, and that's good enough. It's beyond that. It's true whether you believe it or not. It's true whether you believe it or not. So you might as well, investigate this thing carefully. And Christianity is wide open to investigation. I did my doctoral work in comparative religions. So I got a chance to study all of the great world religious traditions like, Buddhism and Hinduism and Islam and Mormonism. You name it, I got a chance to study it up close and personal with people who practice these religions and people who are great scholars in these religions. So I got a good chance to check that out. And I discovered along the way, studying these religions at a fairly high level, that Christianity is set apart from the others in rather dramatic fashion, right? Set apart in rather dramatic fashion. And I can't wait I want to share with you some of the things I discovered that show that Christianity is set apart and really is hard to compare even to these other great religious traditions. In fact, let me do this. Let me read to you what I would consider to be one of the strangest passages in all of religious literature. You don't find something like this in the Bhagavad Gita or the Buddhist Tripitaka or the Quran or the Book of Mormon. This comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 15. 1 Corinthians 15, starting with verse 12. First Corinthians 15, starting with verse 12. The Apostle Paul, in this little discourse he's giving in 1 Corinthians, he suddenly turns his attention on resurrection. And he says a couple of things that I think, if you have modern religious sensibilities, would get you scratching your head a little bit. Well, let's see if that happens to you. Verse 12 of chapter 15 in 1 Corinthians, Paul says, "But if it is preached that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you say there is no resurrection of the dead? If there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith." Really? He continues, "More than that, we are then found to be false witnesses about God, for we have testified about God that he raised Christ from the dead. But he did not raise him if in fact the dead are not raised. For if the dead are not raised, then Christ has not been raised either. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, empty, worthless, of no account would be synonyms for that word. And you're still in your sins. And those also who have fallen asleep in Christ are lost. If only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are all people most to be pitied. Why would I call that one of the strangest passages in all of religious literature? You don't find anything like this in the Book of Mormon or the Bhagavad Gita or the Quran or the Buddhist writings and so on. Nothing like this whatsoever. This passage in 1 Corinthians is the Apostle Paul basically saying, this really happened, and I'd be as pleased as punch if you would investigate it to find out whether it really happened or not. That kind of openness to investigation, that kind of openness to careful and close looks at the claims of Christians is something that does not take place in the other great world religious traditions. Well, the Apostle Paul, in other words, he basically hung Christianity by a thread. Here's the thread, and he's hanging Christianity there and inviting people to come in and see if they can't snip that thread. Now, the Apostle Paul, he's pretty confident that nobody's going to be able to snip that thread because it's made out of some super titanium alloy or something. Nothing's going to break that thread. Plus, the Apostle Paul, he actually saw the risen Jesus himself. And not only that, he knew that God the Father could easily protect the evidence as it made its way down through history and landed in our laps. So we can have the same access and the same knowledge to know that these things really did take place. It turns out that Christianity is true, and it's weirdly true. When you actually start to study the other great world religious traditions, you go, wow, Christianity doesn't even seem like it fits the category of religion very well at all. And I think that's the case. I don't think Christianity fits the category of religion. In fact, if there's a box called religion here it is. Here's the box called religion, and you try to drop Christianity into it. It doesn't go in the box. It's kind of like a cat. Have you ever tried to put a cat in a small box? You're a kitty, It won't go in the box, right? Now, this is getting kind of gross. You can saw pieces off, and you can cut off a few limbs. Now it'll go in the box, but you have to pretty much mangle it to make it happen. And that's the case with Christianity. It doesn't fit the category of religion very well at all. It just doesn't line up with what we think of when we think about religion. Here's an example of this. I got an invitation to give a lecture at the UCLA School of Medicine. You don't get an invitation like this very often as a traditional Christian. So I go, hey, count me in. That sounds like a lot of fun. They said, yeah, well, we have this lecture series, and we're just finishing up all the speakers who are going to join us for it. And the lecture series that we're doing is a lunchtime lecture series, and it actually goes right through the Easter time. So we, the organizing committee, thought it would be good to bring in a Christian who might believe in the resurrection of Jesus. I thought that would be interesting, maybe just because of religious knowledge, Said, hey, I'll come. That sounds like a lot of fun. So I remember they told me what building it was going to be in, and they said, show up next week. And, all right, I'm there. So I remember driving out to UCLA to give this lecture, and I was thinking, this is a good thing that I'm giving this lecture to young medical students, because if dead people can come back to life, young medical students need to know something about that. So I get there, and it's an anatomy lecture hall. Have you ever seen one of these? They go up into the sky. So there'll be one row here, and then they'll shoot up. I'll be talking to people up there. Why? Because normally people will be sitting there looking down on the slab, and they'll be dissecting something, It's an anatomy lab, And so I'm talking to the people up there. It's a lunchtime lecture series, so on the way in, they were grabbing sandwiches out of a big box, I'm sure there was a variety of sandwiches. So they were settling in. They gave a brief introduction to me. And I decided I was just going to kind of give them just the facts, ma'am, kind of lecture. Not a lot of jokes or rhetorical flourishes, nothing like that. I just wanted to get the info out and see how they reacted to it. So I did that. I made this case. And basically, here's my outline. It was Jesus was alive at point A, he was dead at point B, and he was alive again at point C. Thank you very much. And I filled it in, of course, with a little bit of evidence. They were stunned. I was stunned that they were stunned. Now, I could tell that they were stunned because I could actually tell what kind of sandwich they were eating because their mouths were hanging open. Like, tuna. Yeah. Got to feed that cat, up here. And then I was actually kind of weirded out by the fact that they were so stunned about this, It was like they never heard anything like I was talking about. Well, that's exactly what they experienced because, we didn't have much time for Q&A. So when we were done, a small gaggle of them kind of rushed up to the stage and were peppering me with questions. And this one guy, I think he asked the second question. He goes, so here's the thing. I grew up in a Baptist church, and we learned all the Bible stories and about Jesus and all that. But I got to tell you, you're making it sound like it's very different. You're making it sound like it's true. You're making it sound like it's true. And he was a medical student. He wasn't a philosopher, so he was struggling with the words, and the concepts. But I know what he was getting at. He's like, you're making it sound like I can know it to be true in the same way that I can know facts of medicine to be true or false based on investigation and careful research and so on. I go, bing, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You see, people aren't expecting that when they're talking about religion. They think religion just has to do with blind leaping. Whatever you want, and it doesn't matter. Anything goes in the whole religion business. Back to that passage in 1 Corinthians that I read to you. We're talking in that passage about Jesus coming back from the dead. And that is a central point of Christianity. You don't go anywhere unless you're going to be able to embrace the idea that Jesus came back from the dead. That's a required belief of Christianity. Yeah, you have to believe that. Fortunately, the evidence is clear and compelling that this thing really happened. And I'm so grateful for that because when I was in grad school doing doctoral work in comparative religion, and I was a Bible-reading, Jesus-loving, church-going Christian, and there weren't any others that I knew about in the entire student body in that program or among the professors. So it was a bit bizarre. But I discovered if I could get on the subject of the resurrection and get them thinking about it and then start to talk about the evidence that actually supports that, man, it cut through the spiritual fog like nothing else. It really made a huge difference. And it really showed me that Christianity is a religion into which you can walk with your eyes wide open, asking hard questions the whole way. I'll say that again. Christianity is a religion into which you can walk with your eyes wide open, asking hard questions all the way. That is not the case with the other great world religious traditions. It's unique to Christianity. So, I just wanted to give that as a brief introduction to how I'm approaching this topic. But what I want to do is I want to present to you some things that set Christianity apart from the pack, apart from Buddhism and Islam and Hinduism and Mormonism and so on. And I've already mentioned one of them, and that is the idea that Christianity embraces the idea that Jesus came back from the dead. And as we saw in 1 Corinthians 15, this is something that if you don't think it happened, if you don't think the evidence is good enough, you're well within your rights to just drop everything and walk out of Christianity, according to the Apostle Paul himself. So, let's run through some of these. You have a handout that I think is going to be helpful. You can fill in the blanks, and I've known people who've been carrying around that sheet of paper in their Bible for 20 years, I don't know if it's quite that valuable, but hey, give it a shot. At least keep it till tomorrow morning, and we'll see how it goes. All right. So one thing that sets Christianity apart from the pack in my mind, and that really gives me great joy, because I was a science major as an undergrad, and I was a science nerd in high school and the whole thing. So I love the scientific texture of this first one, and that is that Christianity is testable. It's testable. Christianity is testable. And I demonstrated that when I read 1 Corinthians 15. You see, you can investigate the resurrection of Jesus, and if the evidence does not go where you expect it to go in terms of showing that Jesus really did come back from the dead, you're well within your rights to move on to something else. So Christianity is testable. Well, you might say, well, aren't other religions testable? No, not really. Some religions are right up front with this idea. A Zen Buddhist, for instance, if you're a Zen, do we need some more handouts? Because I might have a couple more stashed away in my sock or something. Oh, all right, I think they're good. Some people go, well, now wait a minute. Are you saying that Christianity is exclusively testable? Well, some religions sound like some religions are right up front with the idea that they don't like testing at all. They think it's the wrong way to go. I would put Zen Buddhists in that category. I've talked with Zen Buddhists about this at length, and they get a kick out of me. They think I'm totally going down the wrong path, that actually looking for evidence and thinking you're going to do an investigation and weigh all of this in some careful scholarly balance is really just not going to get you anywhere. In fact, it's going the wrong direction, right? Really, according to a Zen Buddhist, if their goal is to reach enlightenment or liberation, and this is going to happen through careful meditation and clearing your mind and not dealing with the facts, but eliminating all rational thought. As you think too much about religion, it actually sets up barriers that block your progress to enlightenment. So some religions are right up front with the idea that they don't like this investigation track. There's some religions that sound like they're testable, but then when you poke and prod a little bit, it turns out that they're really not. I would put the Mormons in that category. You might bump into Mormons here in Southern California. I've always lived next to a Mormon family, at least a couple doors away. I mean, there's a lot of Mormons. I wasn't a Christian as a kid, but most of my friends were like Mormon people. But if some of you actually are probably pretty conversant in the whole Mormon religion, and maybe you've experienced having them come to your door. So, you're minding your own business one Saturday morning. There's a knock on the door, and it's a couple of local Mormons wearing white shirts and black name tags, and they've parked their bicycles in your flower bed, and they're knocking on your door. And what they will do is they will tell you a story about Joseph Smith Jr., who was a Latter-day prophet of God, who had an encounter with an angel who told him to get some gold plates buried near his home in upstate New York. He was finally released to go get these plates. He went up, dug them out of the ground, brought them down to his cabin, and by using the gift and the power of God, he was able to translate these ancient gold plates with a language that nobody knew into modern English, and that became the Book of Mormon. That's the basic story of the origins of Mormonism. And then, of course, you can open up the Book of Mormon and see what it has to say. The Book of Mormon tells the story of all kinds of activities in the Western hemisphere of the world, culminating in a visit by Jesus himself. And there's all kinds of war and tumult and things. And that's what the Book of Mormon talks about. And so let's say you pay careful attention to what the Mormon missionaries are saying in your living room. And then it sounds like everything they're saying is a bit testable, for goodness sakes. I mean, first of all, did Joseph Smith really encounter gold plates? Were the gold plates really etched with ancient Reformed Egyptian characters that nobody else on the planet could read, and so on? So there's all kinds of things that seem like they are testable. And so you start asking the Mormon missionary about those things. What does the Mormon missionary do at that point? And I've had this happen with Mormon missionaries at my door and local bishops and professors at Brigham Young University and even apostles in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. I'm fairly well connected in the whole Mormon thing. So if you present some facts that counter this operation, what happens? The Mormon missionary will take a step back and say, I don't know what to do with those questions. But you have to understand something, Craig Hazen. I've had a feeling in my heart that this is true. You see how it sounded like it was about evidence and about gold plates and ancient civilizations in the Western Hemisphere and all this. It didn't really have anything to do with that. It had to do with what the Mormon was feeling about it. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of having religious feelings, man. Bring them on. God will take as much as you got for me. But guess what? Christianity is true whether I feel it or not. The evidence is clear and compelling, and God wants us to know that. So, Christianity is testable. You can offer evidence for it. You can offer evidence against it, and the evidence actually means something. In other words, you can become a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ or not based on the evidence in the case. All right. I want to get at some other things that set Christianity apart from the pack. We've already talked about testability. That's an important one. To get at the other issues, I'm going to start telling you a story that actually incorporates all the teaching pieces that I'd like to pass along and helps you fill in the blanks. So this is a true story. Although I ended up writing about it in a book called 5 Sacred Crossings. If you want to get what I'm talking about in depth, it actually comes in this little book. This little book is actually a novel, so it's a story that tells the story. And I think you'll enjoy that. But let me tell you the actual story that led to that novel. I got a call at my Biola University office to come down to a local community college and give a talk in a world religions survey class. So again, I'm in my Biola office, minding my own business. The phone rings. I pick it up, and it's a transfer call from the university operator. She's passing along a phone call that's coming in from a local community college. It turns out that there's a couple of teaching assistants from this World Religion Survey class at a local community college. They're looking for various representatives of religions that they have studied during the course of the semester. They're towards the end of the term, and they want to bring in like a Buddhist monk, and they want to bring in a Catholic priest, and they want to bring in a fundamentalist Christian. Yeah, that's me. That's the role I was supposed to play for them. So they call up Biola. In fact, I can imagine it probably went down like this. They're at this college, and a couple of teaching assistants and the professor are sitting around going, okay, we gotta plan our end of year speakers. Who should we invite? We got our Catholic priest, we got our Buddhist monk. You know what we don't have a fundamentalist Christian. And one of the teaching assistants says, but where do you find them? And another teaching assistant says, I know, Biola University. I'll bet it's crawling with them. To the phone. And they rush off to the phone. And they dial up Biola. And I have no idea if this stuff is true or not, by the way. This is just how I imagine it. They dial up Biola University. The university operator picks up the phone and says, Hello, Biola University. How may I direct your call? Yes, we're looking for a fundamentalist, please. One moment. And it comes to my office. So now the story's real. Okay, so I'm talking to these guys on the phone. They're wanting me to come in and represent Christian fundamentalism for their class. I go, what do you guys think a fundamentalist is, And I start to try to explain it. I'm a teacher. So they're like, do you want to do it or not? I'm like, okay, I'll do it, So they go, okay, be on campus next Wednesday at room blah, 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 and we'll set you up, and you can have a little talk with our students about your fundamentalist religion. I go, okay, So I get in the car, I drive down there, and by the way, I'm very annoying in the morning. I'm full of energy and life, and the students generally aren't. Although I found the room, it was a decent-sized lecture hall. In fact, it was about this size, a little steeper, but about this size. The students, they start shuffling in, and they did look dreary and bleary-eyed, and they really shouldn't sign up for an early morning class, at a community college. But they were carrying giant cups of coffee. I don't even know if they know the name of that cup at Starbucks, but it's a big one. And so they're drinking that and going, hey, it won't be long before these people are, right where I want them, full of energy and ready to go. So I'm there. I meet the teaching assistants, and I go, hey, I'd like to meet the professor of the class. Is he or she here? And they go, he's here. I go, well, where is he? They go, he's over there. I thought, is there some prohibition about using your arms to point in this class? It was weird. This actually happened several times. So I looked down, and it was a row like this. Except it was very collegiate. It had those little desks that fold up and over, And there was a guy sitting in the very last one, and he had his head down. He was a middle-aged man, and he was obviously going in and out of sleep. And I'm thinking, oh, is that the professor down there? And they go, oh yeah, that's him. I go, is he sick? And they go, no. Well, I got the backstory later when I was asking some students. They said, oh yeah, that guy, he always comes in, like the last couple of times that we're having class, he'll come in and he'll be hungover from the night before. He doesn't have to teach the next morning because they're bringing in guest speakers and the TAs just kind of run the thing. And he sleeps it off in the corner over there. And, after a long night of drinking and chasing girls, so he's kind of out of commission. And then the TAs, everybody had settled, and they introduced me, and I don't remember exactly what they said, but I remember how it felt. So I don't remember what they said, but I remember how it felt when they were introducing me, and it felt like here's Craig Hazen. His education most likely consisted of memorizing Bible verses at Bill's Bible College and Feedlot, That's what it felt like. I don't know what they actually said, but when they said that, and this guy's sleeping it off down in the corner, I had this idea. I mean, some of you probably hear from God. I don't know that I ever hear from God. My wife does all the time. Okay, usually it's about something I should be doing, but I had this idea. It probably came from God, and it said, you have free reign here. And I thought, that actually sounds about right. I think I have free reign here because sleeping it off, the TAs, they're already just playing games on their phones. They're not paying attention. So I just kind of took over and said, hey, guys, glad to be here with you. This should be a fun morning, although some of you look like you could really use a bigger cup of coffee. Glad you're here. So my assignment is to give you a talk on the American fundamentalist movement. I'd be happy to do that. Actually, I had to pass some tough exams on that exact topic, so I do know something about it. But on the way down here, I was thinking, oh man, what would be more fun than I should be allowed to have is to get into that classroom and take the students on a journey, because I know that some of you are in this class, and you are in here test driving the various religions, thinking you might even want to sign up for one, And you can tell they're kind of scooting up in their chair. They're becoming interested in what I'm saying. So, yeah. You want to know if, maybe one of the religions is more attractive to you than the others. Maybe you're in here kind of kicking the tires of the various offerings, Like maybe there's a religion that, maybe it goes, it accelerates just a lot more than the other religions. Maybe you want to know if Buddhism handles better in the corners, And so here you are. So what I would like to do, since my doctoral work was in comparative religions, what I would like to do is take you on a little journey through the various religions and see if one might jump out at you. Or look, you're thoughtful people. You're at the college. You're trying to improve your mind. You're taking important classes like art history and astronomy and organic chemistry and nursing classes, all kinds of important things. And so what I want you to do is engage all that critical thinking that you're supposed to do in sorting through all of your religious options, And hey, maybe one will stand out more than the rest. And you can just tell the Starbucks was kicking in there, kind of like, what? What did he say? Oh, we should do that. That's way better than that fundamentalist thing you want to do. Yeah, let's do that searchy thing you're doing, I said, excellent, that's what we'll do. So, look, let me get us started. It seems to me that if you're a thoughtful person and you're on a religious quest, you would obviously start that quest with Christianity. Tumbleweeds, nothing. Then there was a guy sitting in the back of the room, dead center in the back of the room. Everybody else had chairs bolted to the floor like they are here. This guy had a free chair, and he was leaning back against the wall. And again, here's an arm thing. So he raises his hand to ask a question, but he does it like this. And by the way, he had long, stringy blonde hair. It turns out through the course of the morning, this guy actually was a lot smarter than he looked. He looked like the local surfer guy. He had a skateboard, long, stringy blonde hair. And he was sitting next to two other guys who also had skateboards. And turns out they were no smarter than they looked. But this guy was. And so so I thought you weren't going to give us a lecture on fundamentalism, but the first thing you say is you got to start with my religion because it's best. What's that about? I thought the Starbucks has kicked in. We are ready to roll. And I just said, look, I haven't given you any evidence yet, so let me, I'm just making that claim that if you are a thoughtful person on a religious quest, it makes perfect sense that you start with Christianity first in that quest. And so let me do this. Let me give you 5 reasons why. 5 reasons why a thoughtful person on a religious quest really should start with Christianity. I remember when I said 5, I go, why did I say 5? I don't even know if I have 3, But I'm like, come on, Jesus. So the first one the first reason I told him, the first thing that you need to know, reason number 1, why a thoughtful person ought to start that quest with Christianity is that Christianity is testable. It's testable. You can offer evidence for it. You can offer evidence against it. And the evidence actually means something when it comes to trying to figure out which direction to go. And I added a couple of things then that I didn't tell you yet. I said, it's also a very important time-saving methodology. What do you mean, time-saving methodology? I go, well, look, what we're after when we're examining Christianity is we can target the resurrection, because if there's no good reason to believe that the resurrection took place, we can push Christianity aside and move on to something else. So it makes perfect sense to start with Christianity because it is testable. Now, it might take you 7 hours to investigate some of the central claims of Christianity. It might take you 7 days. Maybe you're really diligent. It's going to take you 7 weeks. Or maybe you're really an overachiever and it's going to take you 70 years. In principle, Christianity is investigatable and you can make decisions about it. That is not the case with some of these other religions. In fact, I'm not sure you could even approach that. Take Mahayana Buddhism, for instance. I spoke with a senior Mahayana Buddhist teacher one time and asked him, so how many trips on the wheel of samsara, that is birth, death, and rebirth, right? How many cycles is it going to take before you're finally thrown off into nirvana, right? You're finally liberated. This guy was very excited to get the question, and he said, oh, that would be like something like 1 times 10 to the 60th power of lifetimes. I don't know if you're a little rusty on your scientific notation, but that is 1 with 60 zeros attached to it. I don't know that number, but you're going to be cycling for a long time, right? So it makes perfect sense to start with Christianity, where you can actually get the answers in a finite amount of time, rather than starting with Buddhism, in this case, Mahayana Buddhism, where it's going to take you a long time to discover the truth about the whole matter. So, they were actually tracking with me on the idea that Christianity is testable. They said, what else you got? All right, second reason that a thoughtful person on a religious quest would obviously start that quest with Christianity is that in Christianity, salvation is a free gift from God. In Christianity, salvation is a free gift from God. He just gives it to you. What kind of religion is that? You know, there's no crawling over jagged rocks for miles, you know, in hopes, and maybe delaying some offering in some temple. There's no sitting for hours in arthritis-producing lotus positions, you know, in hopes of moving inwardly toward enlightenment. None of that. He just gives it to you. And by the way, these were college students, so they understood the concept of free very well. They're always looking for a free sandwich, free music download, free, haircut. So they understood that concept. I read to them that famous passage thinking it's going to really connect with them. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not the result of works, that no one should boast. That's Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, right? I'm thinking that's going to really ring their bell. They have never heard that before. They had no idea what that meant. It was a complete non-connection. So I go, I better retool this fast. So I go, better yet, let me give you a story from Jesus himself. It's called the parable of the prodigal son. And so I kind of did the Craig Hazen version of the parable of the prodigal son. You know, there was this man who owned a lot of land and a lot of wonderful cattle and sheep and goats and you name it, all the stuff that was valuable at that time. He had a lot of it, and he had a couple of sons who were going to get it all one day. But one of the sons was a little anxious. He went to Dad and said, "Dad, I want my stuff." Dad knew what he was talking about. The kid wanted his inheritance. So Dad goes, "All right, I knew this day was coming. I'll set you up." So the dad gives him a big bag of shekels. This guy grabs it and he goes, "See you later, Dad." And he takes off for a far country, the text says. When he gets there, it is wine, women, and song all day long. He's blowing through that money like there's no tomorrow. Boom, 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 boom. Unfortunately for him, about the time he's spending his last coin, there's a bit of a drought. There's a famine that hits the land. There's no work. There's no food. And this guy's in serious trouble. He's got no money. He's got no relatives in the region. And and this is not really a good thing for a young Jewish boy. He's about ready to leap over the fence and eat the pods that the pigs are eating. That's how desperate he was getting. So the text says he came to his senses. What am I doing? I could have been living it up at Dad's place. I could have been like just living at the North 40 gate, running that thing. Anything would have been better than this. So he turns towards home and he starts that long, dusty walk of repentance all the way home. So Jesus continues at the story. The father's out on his porch one day and he sees somebody walking by his property. And he can't make out who it is. It's still too far away. After a few minutes, the dad squints. He goes, "Oh, That's my son coming. Now, Jesus is telling this, and the crowd that originally heard this they kind of knew where this story would be going, but they kind of had it wrong because Jesus gave it a little bit of a twist. The father sees the kid, and what the audience is thinking is going to happen is the dad's going to say, hey, he's going to get the biggest, burliest guy on his farm and say, hey, go escort my ungrateful son off this property. He has his inheritance. He can just live with it. But that's not where it went at all. Jesus says his father was filled with compassion seeing the boy coming. And in a very undignified way, the father leaps off the porch and he runs to the boy and he throws his arms around his neck and starts kissing him. And he's calling to his servants, bring some sandals, kill the fatted calf. We are feasting tonight. My son was lost and now he's found. By the way, I did some research on this. Some people claim that this was lifted by Christianity from some other religions. Not on your life. This is totally attributable to Christianity, and there's no getting around that. And by the way, you will not find a picture of the love of God more intense than this in any of the world religions on the planet today or through human history. This is unique to Christianity. In Christianity, salvation is a free gift from God. We worship a God who can't wait to just see you coming on that road of repentance and meet you there and wrap his arms around you and kill the fatted calf and party tonight in the name of Jesus. The third reason that a thoughtful person on a religious quest would obviously start that quest with Christianity is, with Christianity, you get an amazing worldview fit. An amazing worldview fit. What I mean by that is Christianity paints a picture of the world that matches the way the world really is. Christianity paints a picture of the world that matches the way the world really is. I said that to the students. And thinking I'm pretty clever, I didn't have a number 3, but I've got one now, and there it is. And then skateboard guy pops my bubble. He raises his hand, and he goes, it sounds like now you're just making stuff up. And he was kind of right. I said, look, that's a little unfair because all I did was make the statement. And it was, admittedly, it was a very broad and brash statement. But let me at least give you a little bit of evidence to try to back that up. Again, with Christianity, you get an amazing worldview fit. And I'm claiming that Christianity paints a picture of the world that matches the way the world really is. Let's take the problem of evil, pain, and suffering. I claim as a Christian that evil, pain, and suffering are real. And if you're a Christian, if you're a Christian or not, you've probably experienced evil, pain, and suffering. I guarantee in a room like this, everybody in this room has experienced evil, pain, and suffering. You know it's real. You wouldn't doubt it for a second. But there are religious worldviews that attempt to deal with evil, pain, and suffering by renaming it Maya, which means illusion in Sanskrit, and then just kind of brushing it off the table. I don't think that's really going to do the job, right? In other words, I think evil, pain, and suffering are real. I think we know that they are real, and I think that just calling them an illusion is not going to really solve the problem. I'll give you an example. Say the doors in the lecture hall in here open up right now, and in walks an elderly woman with a cane, right, and a limp, and she's making her way down, and she sits right here. Well, we don't get classroom invasions by elderly women very often, so we pause for a moment and say, "Madam, what's your story?" And she doesn't hesitate for a second. She gets up, she turns to the class, and she starts telling this gripping tale of the Holocaust. When she was a small girl in a Polish, mostly Jewish town, German troops come in and start rounding people up and throwing them into trucks. They haul them down to the local train station and stuff them into boxcars, and I mean stuff them. And during a sweltering summer day, there's no water, there's no facilities. It's hell on wheels, literally, on the entire trip to, recreation at a concentration camp. Train pulls up, they open the door, they start tossing out dead bodies because people have already died. They start sorting the rest. A lot of the people are just moved right into a giant compound with a couple of big smokestacks in the background. We know what was going on there. A couple of the lucky ones were funneled over to a work camp on the other side where they got to live as long as they could work. This elderly woman was just a little girl at the time. She was swept away with her whole family. Her whole family went one direction, and she went towards the work camp. She did her best to grab a crust of bread here or there, and she was just wearing rags, but she did her best just to try to stay alive. She was just a little thing, though. Fortunately for her, she was able to stay alive long enough so that the Red Army, the Russian army, could come into that region of Poland and liberate that camp. But here she stood, nearly naked, nearly starved to death. Her whole family's gone. Her whole village is gone. And somehow she finds a way to lift herself up, dust herself up, and march down through the decades. And here she stands in front of us telling us this gripping tale of the Holocaust. What are you going to tell her? Are you going to tell her, cheer up, lady? Just turn that frown upside down. Just understand it's an illusion, and you'll understand that and your happiness will flood in. Not on your life. That might, saying something like that to a person who suffered that dramatically might be as evil as the Nazi death camps, for goodness sake. That's horrific. And it's wrong, and it's evil, and it's truly painful. We know that to be the case. We cannot escape this. How do Christians deal with evil, pain, and suffering? We don't have the answers to every individual and why they suffer in the way they do. I think we learned that from the book of Job, to do our best just to cling to God in such circumstances. So we don't have all the answers, but we do know why there is evil, pain, and suffering. Human beings rebelled against God and ushered in lots of nastiness into the human condition that we battle day in and day out. But there's a flip side to this for Christians, and that is we are called to do our best in this situation, to leap into the trenches with those who are experiencing evil, pain, and suffering, and to bear them up in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, who himself suffered dramatically. And it doesn't end there. We worship a God who has promised to wipe away every tear and to correct every moment of injustice. Now, there is a way to handle the problem of evil, pain, and suffering, painting a picture that matches the way the world really is. In Eastern religions, they don't make a match at all, and it's really askew and difficult to understand evil, pain, and suffering in that context. Moving on. The fourth reason, I'm going to give you the answer that you can write in, but I don't have time to go into it. And it's a little more technical than the others. Number 4, you get to live a non-compartmentalized life. You get to live a non-compartmentalized life. If you're curious enough during the Q&A, you can ask me about that. But let's move on to number 5, the final one. All right, so let me set this one up. I didn't know how long I had to talk to this group. The guy's still down there sleeping it off. The TAs aren't paying a lot of attention. And I just keep talking and nobody says anything. Although I did notice a couple of students starting to pack backpacks. That's usually a telltale sign that class is over according to their calculations. So I decided to move a little quicker. I said, all right, there's one more important thing that I want to make sure you get. And it's point number 5. Point number 5 as to why a thoughtful person on a religious quest would obviously start that quest with Christianity. And it's this: Christianity has Jesus at the center. Christianity has Jesus at the center. Now, right about when I say that, students are like, it's time to go. And they start packing up big time. Some of them are standing up. There's another class. I can see it through a window on the side over here. And they were starting to come into the class because it was time for them to set up and get going. And I just made this claim about Christianity has Jesus at the center. And skateboard guy right at that time takes one last shot at me. He goes, well, of course, Christianity has Jesus at the center. It's Christianity. And everybody kind of giggled and started packing up their backpacks and started to walk out of the room. I don't want skateboard guy to have the last word. So I go, wait, everybody, what in the world have you been learning in this class? What have you been learning? Don't you know that Jesus is the universal religious figure? Everybody wants a piece of Jesus. Everybody wants to take him, change him up a little bit, and drop him right near the center of their religion. Take Buddhism, for example. A lot of Buddhists think that Jesus might very well be a reincarnation of the Buddha himself. If they don't go that far, they might think he's a great bodhisattva. In the Mahayana tradition, that's somebody who helps people right up to the edge of enlightenment, helps them over the hump, and then nobly steps back to help yet another person. So that's what they think of Jesus. Very, very important teacher and guide in Buddhism. In Hinduism, for goodness sakes, many Hindus believe that Jesus might very well be an avatar of Vishnu. Vishnu, a very important Hindu deity. And Jesus might be one of those avatars where he takes on a kind of a physical form to communicate to humans. If they don't go that far, they might say, like Gandhi did, that Jesus was certainly one of the greatest religious teachers of all time. In Islam, for goodness sakes, in Islam, Jesus emerges as a figure greater than Muhammad himself. It's very clear that Muhammad is a prophet in the Islamic tradition, but so is Jesus. But in addition, Jesus is a legitimate miracle worker. He was born of a virgin, and he will stand with Allah at the scales of justice at the end of time. I'm not sure of the exact score, but it's something like Muhammad won Jesus 4. So I remember telling the class that, and I said, doesn't it make sense that you would start with Christianity, where it's had that universal religious figure, Jesus, planted right at the center since the very beginning? And there was mayhem in the classroom at that point. So I just scooped up my stuff off the lectern and just walked right out of the door just like that one, and just kept on going until I got to some lunch tables. There was a group of students followed me right out the door because we didn't have that much time for Q&A, and they were kind of chomping at the bit to ask me some questions. So we just kept walking. I plopped down on a picnic bench. We ended up eating pastries and coffee. Then it was some kind of ham sandwich for lunch. We ended up at dinner time. It was like an all-day seminar. I had no idea it was going there. But the idea that you could actually engage your mind and evaluate the various religions thoughtfully was actually a bit of an epiphany for them. And it kept them going most of the day. I don't think I made a single convert, and I didn't really track them. It was before Facebook was really going crazy, and they all would have become my friend on that particular day had we had social media up and rolling in those days. But I'll stop there. Thank you for your kind attention, and I'll just see if you have some questions. I'd be happy to help.
Yes, thank you. Hello, hello. Can we have the mic on for questions? There we go. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hazen. That was a fantastic talk. We're going to have questions now. I'll come around with the mic, so just raise your hand if you have a question. I just want to ask in advance that we keep the questions to at least roughly related to the topic tonight so that we can kind of stay targeted. That would be great. I'll throw out the first one. I'm going to take the bait on number 4 on that Christianity, how did you phrase it, is a non-compartmentalized religion. Can you just maybe give us the 2-minute version of that so we get the full scope?
Again, the fourth the fourth reason a thoughtful person would start their quest with Christianity is this. You get to live a non-compartmentalized life. One thing that I know about studying Eastern religious traditions is that by and large, rationality, that is reason and logic and investigation and so on, are barriers to enlightenment. They're actually negatives. And you want to get rid of them. You know, you gotta clear them out so you can have a clear pathway forward. The problem is that you have to live a life in two spheres, the everyday life and the religious life, in order for that to work. Because you can't escape logic and investigation and rationality and careful thinking. I mean, even if you want to cross the street, you have to look both ways before you do it to make sure, in a rational sense, that there are no trucks bearing down on you. You have to use rationality when you're feeding your children. You know, you got them in the high chair and you're going to feed them strained peas. You better look on that label to make sure it's not, your husband's foot cream, right? You got to make sure you're getting the right thing. That's part of rationality, and that's what happens in the everyday life. Somehow, though, in Eastern religions, if you just step over here into the religious life, you don't need logic or rationality anymore. The problem there is also that Eastern religions claim to be more holistic, more of a oneness situation. Yet here's something right at the center that breaks them in two. The everyday life and the religious life. In the everyday life, logic, rationality, investigation apply moment by moment. But in their religious life, they're claiming it doesn't at all. In Christianity, you get to live a non-compartmentalized life because those two spheres, the sphere of the everyday life and the sphere of religion, crash together in terms of rationality. In other words, we are as rational as we can be when we're engaging God. We actually worship a God who says, come let us reason together. We worship a God who wants us to come in and worship him with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. We worship Jesus, the logos, or the reason of God. Rationality is just part and parcel of Christian worship. So we don't live in two separate worlds. We bring those two together in terms of rationality. We get to live a non-compartmentalized life.
Great, thank you. Okay, if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll bring the mic around.
So, since Christianity has Jesus at the center, what is the difference between Christianity, Catholic, and Mormon?
Yeah.
Mormonism? When in reality, I'm just saying see it in the fact that Catholics, just because they have saints, doesn't mean Jesus is not in the center, because Jesus is in the center for them. And same thing for Mormonism and Christianity.
Yeah.
So, what is the difference between those three relations?
In terms of how they approach Jesus, they're a lot closer than other doctrines that we might look at. So in other words, their Christology. What do they think about Jesus? Traditional Protestantism, where we really rely on the Bible to give us our information. We have a pretty clear picture of Jesus. We trust the text. We think there were eyewitnesses who saw him and heard his teaching and carefully wrote these things down. They saw him perform miracles. They saw him live a godly, perfect, sinless life. And so it's all there. And I think that translates over into Roman Catholicism. I taught at a Catholic school for 6 years. And in Roman Catholicism, they've been custodians of a wonderful picture of Jesus. I think the thing that ends up being a problem in Roman Catholicism would be the fact that some of the people who go to the Catholic Church are confused about where they're going to find the truth, that it's just really about rituals. When the Catholic Church has all along kept a brilliant picture of Jesus alive. Mormons are pretty clear on Jesus too, although it gets muddled because they have a warped view of the Trinity. For instance, Mormons, I can't really consider Christians because Mormons are not monotheists. They believe that there's more than one God. Right? Does that help?
So it's all right. You know the material they found has like a face on it and stuff. Okay, and they say that they believe that it was Jesus or whatever. Because it's so old, I don't know if it would have DNA on it, and I'm sure they tested it, right?
You're talking about the Shroud of Turin,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah. Did it have DNA on it? Do you know?
I don't even know if they tested it for DNA because
They should have,
Yeah.
because Jesus was born of a virgin and the Holy Ghost, and the DNA would be completely different from ours.
Well, if they didn't test it for DNA, it was simply because they
There
just
was
didn't
no-
think it would have survived, in a testable form. But
But if it was God, it would
Yeah.
have survived.
yeah,
Because
I
God-
haven't heard any alarming reports that, oh my goodness, we found Jesus' DNA and we were able to clone him.
Excuse me. Can I get past you? Can I go past you?
Didn't we have, or at some point, wasn't there access to that spear or whatever that
The spear.
that pierced him on when he was up on the...
Yeah, I just watched Indiana Jones' Dial of Destiny, and that spear was in it.
Oh, maybe that's where I
I
got
think that's probably where you got it.
That's where I got it.
Yeah, I don't think somebody certainly is claiming to have it somewhere, but the evidence might be problematic. The evidence for the Shroud of Turin, if you don't know what that is, I'll give you a quick explanation. It's a purported burial cloth of Jesus. So Jesus was crucified on a cross. They took him down. They wrapped him in linens and put some anointing oil and some perfumes on him and stuff and put him in a tomb. Some people believe that they have found the actual burial shroud of Jesus. The evidence is actually quite good. I don't think the best scholars that I know can't ever go, it's almost certainly it. They go, there's a good chance. There's a lot of good evidence. That's about as far as they'll go.
Hey, you said Mormons had more than one God or believed in more than one God?
Yes.
I don't know much about Mormonism, but I'm just curious as to how many gods do they believe in?
How many gods do they believe in? I have never gotten quite a straight answer, but they think they would normally just say one. There's only one, and in fact, this is kind of a quote from Joseph Smith or from Brigham Young, I forget which, but there's only one God with which we have to do. That's the quote. In other words, there's only one God we actually interact with. But there's a universe filled with gods, is a traditional Mormon teaching.
And Mormons also believe that all of us can become gods and are becoming gods, right? So that's a very different.
Yeah. It's you have to be a pretty strong traditionalist Mormon to believe that. But that was taught by Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, and some modern Mormons do believe that.
I was raised Mormon, and I know it's true. Like that.
Yes. Okay, who else has I'll come over to the other side. You don't have to be on this side. Is there anyone over there who wants to raise their hand? Okay, let me go over there. We'll come back here. We have some time for questions.
You're good at this. Vanna White might be retiring.
I have a question. How do you look at, like, I continue to hear you say Christian as a religion, Christianity as a religion. I kind of look at it as a relationship because the Pharisees were religious and they were far from God. How would you look at it? More of a relationship or as a religion?
Yeah, I actually don't like connecting Christianity with a religion, because I know what pops into people's mind when they hear about religion. They think about rituals and boredom, and nobody can know if it's true. So I really don't like to connect the two, but it's the problem of the language. I want to communicate something to people and they think Christianity is a religion, and it requires some explanation. If you're saying no, it's more of a relationship. That's fine, but we have to be prepared to explain what we're talking about there. I think it's accurate. And I think it actually shows that another way that Christianity is set apart. That it's really not about the rituals. It's about the person, Jesus, and our personal connection and relationship with him. So glad you brought that up.
Someone had a question back here. Okay.
Yeah, I had a question about the world of religions. This is about the Freemasons, and they have a Bible opened up in their lodge. I was just curious if you can tell me if there's any sort of connection between the Freemasons and Christianity.
There is, and it's mainly, there's a lot of very confused Christians who join the Freemasons sometimes and thinking, they think of it as a social club. But once you start reading the documents of Freemasonry, you start to go, a knowledgeable Christian should probably know better than to join up with the Freemasons. I mean, even what they call their local leader, like the worshipful master. So in Freemasonry, that's the name of the guy who's in charge of a local spot, Worshipful master. Once I read that, and I'm a Christian, I'm going, maybe this isn't for me, because I only have one worshipful master. But my grandfather was a Mason. In fact, I inherited, his Masonic books. He never said a word about it, but once in a while he'd come home wearing a funny hat, It was a social club for him. So a lot of people take that approach to it. I don't recommend Freemasonry, but I think if you're a thoughtful, astute Christian and you read some of their documents or actually attend one of their meetings, you go, whoa, this is just kind of weird. Especially in comparison to traditional Christian theology and biblical teaching. Thanks for bringing that up.
Who else has a question? Raise your hand. Oh, I see one down here. Okay. I feel like I need to run. Was it you?
Thank you. I've never given the Shroud of Turin much thought because I know it's a 14-foot cloth, shows, his face. And because of John 20, verse 7, how do you, because you said there's a lot of evidence, seeming evidence for the shroud. How do you reconcile the two with the cloth being folded separate, apart from the rest of the grave clothes in John 20?
Yeah, I think that's a problem for the theory. I mean, that's important. But you can imagine that they'd have the main burial cloth, and maybe they did put a separate cowl over or something. Maybe that's what they were talking about. We don't know much about it. But that does cause a problem that needs to be solved. The kind of evidence we're talking about is the photographic negatives that actually show up on the shroud. They just can't be explained. It's as if this shroud was actually filmed in an ancient film camera, and they rolled it up and they took photographs of him as he was having some sort of nuclear burst. I have a friend, he's actually a physicist up at the Hanford Research Station in Washington State, one of the most important nuclear research facilities in the country. And he spent about every spare moment of his life studying the shroud, and he thinks that some sort of actual nuclear incident took place with Jesus. There's some sort of energy burst that they cannot figure out how to even to measure it. But they haven't been able to find anything else that could actually cause that image on the shroud. The person to read on this, and I'm sure you can find a book or an article, would be Gary Habermas. Gary, G-A-R-Y, Habermas, H-A-B-E-R-M-A-S. Any article, any book will be, he's a first-rate scholar. He does not go on flights of fancy. He sticks to the facts, man. And so you'll walk away with the real picture. But in talking with Gary in private, he goes, I don't know what to do. This thing's probably real. So I love hearing from a thoughtful, knowledgeable scholar on what they really think of behind closed doors. That's what he would say. Oh, the book? Yeah. It's called Five Sacred Crossings.
It's a great book. I can vouch for it. I have read it. Yes, great book.
Thank you. It's a novel, so don't let it scare you. And summertime is coming up, so if you need beach reading, here it is. Yeah.
Craig, I want to go back to your first point tonight when you talked about Christianity being testable, right? And then you read from 1 Corinthians 15:14 that if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is useless and so is your faith, right? So we talked about how important it is that Christianity is testable. We have to look for the evidence of the resurrection. So we can call that the truth test for Christianity, right? It comes back to the resurrection. It's not the shroud. It's not any other piece of evidence we might talk about. But how would we get to the evidence for the resurrection specifically? I know that's a whole other talk you could do, but maybe just for anyone who hasn't ever heard that before, what kinds of evidence would you be talking about outside of maybe something like has come up tonight? Just give people kind of an idea of what that would be.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, in my view, the resurrection of Jesus, the fact that he was alive at point A, dead at point B, and alive again at point C, is knowable history. It's not some weird religious idea I have. It's true whether I believe it or not, but the evidence is clear and it's compelling that this really happened. In fact, I just look up Gary Habermas again. He's right now publishing a 4-volume magnum opus, his final great work that he's doing on the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And it's quite compelling. The kinds of things that he would bring up in his book is, number one, Jesus was a real historical figure and he died by Roman crucifixion. That is knowable history. In fact, even the people who think Gary Habermas is completely out to lunch still think that part of it is true, that Jesus was actually killed by a Roman execution squad on a cross. They think that Jesus was buried in a tomb. Most likely, in fact, even liberal scholars have come around to the idea that Jesus was buried in the tomb that was owned by a wealthy member of the Sanhedrin by the name of Joseph of Arimathea. That Jesus had that Jesus had a group of followers who were really bummed out that Jesus had died by crucifixion. Right? That too is knowable history. Even skeptics would agree that that's true. That the tomb that he was originally buried in was empty just a few days later is also knowable history. That's not just some weird Christian idea. Even the skeptics believe that takes place. Everybody has to try to reconcile the empty tomb when they're dealing with the facts surrounding Jesus and his purported resurrection. Then we have the disciples being transformed from people who were doubters to bold proclaimers of Jesus' death and resurrection. How did that happen? Well, it happened because there's a good chance they saw him alive again. And even though other people were giving him a lot of grief, maybe even trying to kill them over these beliefs, they nonetheless pushed these beliefs forward and started the Christian church. And there's probably 5 or 6 more facts like that line up. And don't forget, even the skeptics believe these facts are true and need to deal with them when they're coming up with their explanations.
So if anyone is intrigued by that and would like to learn about the historical evidence for the resurrection, looking at all those kinds of historical facts and how you would figure out what the best explanation is for those, then talk to your case manager because they have access to a whole bunch of books that are kept here at the Rescue Mission that can point you to that information. And so there's a lot that's been written about that by Gary Habermas as well as several other people, including Lee Strobel, who's going to be here. So it's not something that you are blindly leaping into the dark, as Dr. Hazen's been talking about all night. There is so much historical evidence that very often, if you've never heard about any of this, it's not just you. Very often people have never heard about this, even growing up in the church. I grew up in the church. I was raised in the church in a Christian family for years and years and years, and I never heard a word about the fact that there's historical evidence for the resurrection. So if this is new to you, don't be surprised. Unfortunately, it's new to a lot of Christians. So I would really encourage you to ask your case manager about that if you want to learn more about that. We have just a couple minutes left. Are there any other questions that anyone has?
as a kid, as accepting Christ in high school, I always wondered when Christ was crucified that we know in Hebrews that the Temple Mount was basically a replica of what was in heaven. And Jesus took the blood and poured it on the mercy seat. And I always kind of wondered did his blood ever hit the mercy seat on earth? It's a far stretch. And then I saw a show. I don't know if you've seen it. Not too long ago, a couple of years ago. And it was either on Discovery or the History Channel. And they had to redo the Church of the Sepulchre, which was supposedly where he was crucified. And they had to get down to the foundation to make sure the church wouldn't come down. Well, while they were down there, supposedly they found this room. They found some of the articles that were in the temple because some of the articles were supposedly hidden from Romans and all this underground. And then there was one part that this stone was broken, and they're saying the Ark of the Covenant was under there. I don't know if you ever saw the show. I mean, it was a stretch, and it's like, it's the weirdest thing. And they actually took, supposedly there was a stain on the stone, and they took it and they did some DNA tests. But it was either on Discovery or History Channel. And I remember seeing it and thinking, okay, this is far beyond I could think. I didn't know if you'd ever seen it.
I've never seen it, and that's probably irresponsible for them going that far with that kind of thing.
Oh, it made you wonder, and I'm sure it was a thing of somebody's making something up or...
Well, back in the day when we didn't have so many cable channels and streaming operations, when Easter would come around, grocery store magazine racks would be filled with Jesus stuff.
Oh, yes.
Time magazine, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report, you name it. They had to have, probably Better Homes and Gardens. You had to have Jesus on the cover because it sold magazines like crazy. And I noticed that a lot of these cable shows, that just, they're fighting for ratings with some, pretty formidable opponents. They love to trot out some good Jesus stuff.
This one, they really stretched it.
Yeah.
And I'm going, okay, this was a stretch. I have no idea if it's real, but it's like, okay, this is a stretch, but it's great imagination to wonder that.
That is part of the reason the Indiana Jones franchise has done so well.
Boy, not the truth.
Okay, we'll squeeze in one final question. Who is it going to be? Okay, I see one all the way in the back. I'm coming.
Could you hold it? So I have a verse here, and I would just ask if you would explain what it means to you. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 15. It says, He died for all, so that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but only for him who died and was raised to life for their sake.
I mean, that's just a lovely picture of the work of Jesus. And that's something I would want to print out and glue to the dashboard of my car. So,
did you have a specific question about it? Was there something that you weren't sure about?
No, so I'll just okay, since we have the evidence that Jesus actually lived and died on the cross, and if we accept the fact that he died for our sins somehow, do you agree that everything that we do should be centered upon Christ?
Say that last sentence.
Do you agree that everything that we do should be centered upon Christ?
Amen. Absolutely. There's no other game in town. In fact, I don't even feel like I have to. I just want to, because that's where life is every day. Hey, not only is we find eternal life, we find joy in everyday life through him. So I'm all for it. Thanks for ending on a great note.
And for those of you who maybe have always been a Christian and you've always kind of taken the resurrection for granted, I hope that this has encouraged you too to think more about it and how you can learn this evidence so that you can share your faith with others. That's a really important component of this. A few years ago, when I was at a Little League game, my son was playing baseball, and one of the moms asked me, "So, what do you do?" Which is always a little bit of a tough question because, like Dr. Hazen, I'm an apologist. I write books and I speak. And so whenever somebody asks that question and I don't know the context from which it's coming, I kind of have to explain, well, I do this thing called Christian apologetics, which is how you make a case for and defend the truth of Christianity. And then they ask questions, what does that mean? So I remember explaining to this mom very specifically, and, like I'll write about evidence for the resurrection. Like, how would we actually know that Jesus was raised from the dead 2,000 years ago? And she looked at me just so bright-eyed, and she's like, wow, I didn't know anyone actually believed that happened.
Yeah.
And she said she went to Catholic school her whole life. I had already written books at the point at which I was talking to this woman, and it was one of the most impactful, shocking moments in my life. She had been exposed to Christianity in a Catholic school her entire childhood, and it never was taught to her or presented in a way that she realized that people actually believed Jesus was literally raised from the dead. So maybe this seems all kind of theoretical tonight because you've always been a Christian. Maybe you've taken it for granted, but there are lots of people who don't even know that we actually believe that. So grateful for you coming tonight. Can we just give Craig another round of applause to thank him? And really fast, before you guys head off, I want to make sure everybody knows that in 2 weeks there is an equipped discussion, a discussion group, and for everyone who comes to that discussion, you will get, students here at the Rescue Mission, you will get a free copy of Craig's book, Fearless Prayer. This is another excellent book, another short read. You specialize in short reads, apparently. It's a wonderful book about prayer. So I'd encourage you to come to that, and if you plan to do that, then Teresa, raise your hand back there, Teresa, in the yellow shirt, she has a sign-up sheet, so you can sign up back there, and then you will get this. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight.